joined. Welcome to the 2024 California Tsunami Preparedness webinar. We are still have a lot of people joining, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Just want to introduce myself. I'm Mark Benthian, Executive Director for Earthquake Country Alliance, working with many of you and others to improve earthquake and tsunami mitigation and preparedness. People across the state, organized in regions and by committees, and we have support from Cal OES that provides FEMA funding for not only from the National Earthquake Hazards Reduction Program, but also funding from NOAA, from the National Tsunami Hazard Mitigation Program, to support activities both again for earthquake and tsunami programs. And I am based at the USC statewide California Earthquake Center, where we coordinate activities statewide with ECA. If you're not a member of the Earthquake Country Alliance, it's free. Please join us at earthquakecountry.org/join. Of course, we have a website at earthquakecountry.org, in Spanish at terremotos.org. We support the tsunamizone.org website for Tsunami Preparedness Week. Of course, that starts this Saturday, March 23rd through 31st in 2024. And also Shakeout. We're not going to talk about that today. Of course, that comes up in October. And so you can see there's these two big events, Tsunami Preparedness Week in March, and of course, Shakeout each October. And while you can have activities during these time periods on these days, you of course can have tsunami and earthquake drills and other activities throughout the year. And Tsunami Zone is basically similar to Shakeout, where you can register those activities so we get a good count of how many people are involved, and also provide you a lot of resources to support your drills and activities. For today's webinar, we have three great presenters who are going to give updates and information on what's happening statewide about our tsunami hazard statewide, what the state does to mitigate and help us all get prepared for tsunamis, as well as a local project from the city and county of San Francisco, Department of Emergency Management. So we'll have Nick Grawl from California Geological Survey, Yvette Leduc from California Office of Emergency Services, and Susan Clark from City and County of San Francisco. If you just joined again, please put questions that you might have into the Q&A section of your menu bar. Click the Q&A and you'll be able to type a question. And if you have any comments or issues that we need to figure out, then please put those into the chat. We'll keep an eye on that as well. You're welcome, as some people are doing, to introduce yourself, but you do not need to. And let's see, we already have some questions coming in. We will address those, but we'll go ahead and go to, and also we may be addressing some questions in text in the Q&A. So if you go there, you'll be able to see if there are any that have been answered by text by clicking on the Answered tab. And so Nick, I think your presentation has some automation to it, but let's go ahead and get you started. I'm going to first spotlight you, and then you can begin. There we go. And moving forward.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. My name is Nick. I'm an engineer and geologist for the California Geological Survey. And so even though large tsunamis are rare, the California coast is at risk. California has a history of damaging tsunamis, which have resulted in the loss of life and severe damage to harbor and coastal areas. Awareness, planning, and preparedness can save lives and keep communities resilient. So in this presentation, you'll learn about tsunami hazards in California. So we're part of the California Tsunami Program, which is primarily run by Cal OES, the California Geological Survey, and the National Weather Service. And together, we plan for the next tsunami, helping to protect the state's people, resources, and economy by coordinating our efforts with a team of federal, state, and local partners to help inform California's response to tsunami hazards. And our mission is really to make California more tsunami resilient by creating tsunami hazard maps, guidance, and educational material for the general public and local officials. Next, please. So prior to the last 6 to 7 years, the focus of our program has been on tsunami evacuation and preparedness. But more recently, the focus has expanded to the different types of planning activities that are part of the disaster planning cycle, including hazard assessment, preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery planning. And we see there's a huge benefit to expanding this work because based on a study with the USGS in 2013 that identified improvements to all levels of tsunami planning could reduce casualties and damage by 80 to 90% during future large tsunami events. So with Cal OES and our other partners, we have provided a number of new tools to help inform tsunami planning. So the California Geological Survey, in conjunction with Cal OES and local county, city, and tribal agencies, have updated the official state tsunami hazard area maps for evacuation plannings online at tsunami.ca.gov. You could go there and navigate to find our new maps by clicking on that link there. So the updated maps, they use higher resolution modeling for all low-lying populated areas to assist local agencies and the public in evacuation planning. Maps and data are compiled with the best currently available scientific information and represent areas that could be exposed to tsunami hazards. Locate where you live, work, or visit by using the Find Address box, or you can zoom in to street level detail and see if your area of interest is within a tsunami hazard area. So tsunami hazard area maps are grouped by coastal counties, and you could click on a county and that'll take you to its own web page with additional resources, including how to get more local information. And if you want to learn more about tsunami preparedness information, including how the updated tsunami hazard area maps were created, you could check out our state tsunami website again, and then click on the Tsunami Preparedness Guide. Right there. You click on that one, I'll take you right there. So here you can browse basic tsunami information, see recent damaging tsunami events in California, and get tips on how to use the updated tsunami hazard area maps. Sounds pretty good, right? Oh, so we're showing an example for Santa Barbara County here, and where it has local information for that county, including how to sign up for your local emergency preparedness, like readysbc.org. So we'll go to the next slide, but let's talk about historic California tsunamis. So more than 150 tsunamis have impacted California's coast since 1800. Many are barely noticeable, but nearly a dozen tsunamis have caused fatalities or significant losses. And then advance one, please. So the most devastating tsunami to hit California in recent times occurred back in March 28th, 1964. And the tsunami arrived in Crescent City about 4 hours after a magnitude 9.2 earthquake ruptured in Alaska. Now, the first 3 surges were relatively small, so people came back down to the waterfront to clean up. They clean up after the smaller surges left. Excuse me. However, the 4th surge was the largest. At 21 feet high, the surge swept into Crescent City, taking the lives of 10 people. A total of 12 lives were lost in California, and over 289 buildings were destroyed in Crescent City alone. Now, this is a good reminder that tsunamis are tricky, and that the first surge may not be the largest, but it could be. Don't go back into the hazard area until local officials give the all-clear message. Now, more recently, many of us are familiar with the March 11th, 2011 tsunami that was generated by a magnitude 9.1 earthquake offshore of Japan. After traveling 10 hours across the Pacific Ocean, that tsunami caused $28 million in losses in Del Norte County and about $4 million in Mendocino County. And in total, it cost about $100 million in losses statewide. And 1 life was lost as that person went down to the ocean to get a closer look at that incoming tsunami. Again, this is a good reminder to not go down to the ocean for that tsunami selfie. So the last major tsunami to impact California was in 2022 from the Tonga volcanic eruption. And this tsunami caused about $11.5 million in losses to harbor infrastructure, waterways, and boats. And we learned important lessons from this event, including how to improve our early alert messaging, the need to evacuate harbors and beaches in a tsunami advisory level event, and to improve our outreach to those that live on board their boats. All right. So about 85% of tsunamis are caused by large earthquakes below the ocean floor. And if you click again, the remaining 15% of tsunamis can be caused by volcanic activity like the Tonga volcanic eruption, but also by landslides, certain types of weather, and asteroids or comets that impacts the Earth's surface. Next. So most tsunamis are caused by large earthquakes below the ocean floor, right? And when a large underwater fault shifts abruptly, it displaces or it lifts up the ground, causing the water above it to lift up as well. And waves are generated and move out in all directions across the ocean. Now, tsunami waves can travel as fast as 600 miles per hour out in the open ocean, which is about the same speed as a jet plane. And as the waves enter shallower water along the coast, their speed slows, the waves compress, and they build in height. So it's not unusual to see 3 to 4 foot waves breaking somewhere off the California coast. Thanks, Mark. And we often get asked, how is a tsunami different than that? Well, a wind wave breaks along the coast in these circular curling wave patterns. Water flows onshore and out in less than a minute. Regular waves are good for surfing, while tsunamis are not. More on that in a bit. Tsunamis, on the other hand, are generated by the displacement of a lot of water. Large tsunamis can travel across the entire ocean, impacting coastal locations far away. A tsunami has many surges. Remember, the first surge is almost never the largest, and the danger period can last 24 hours or more, as it did in California during the 2011 Japanese tsunami along our coast. And also important to know that tidal levels can affect the impacts of tsunami, as we saw in Santa Cruz Harbor in 2022, as that tsunami arrived at high tide. Next. I love this animation here. So this water height animation at Newport Beach compares a series of surges from both swells and tsunamis. And the animation on the left shows how swells have a minimal impact on water height within this bay. Typically, wind waves approaching the coastline have a period of 8 to 20 seconds on average, which reduces the potential for flooding areas inland. Now, the animation on the right shows how a tsunami with a similar wave height would impact the same area. Tsunami peak surges arrive about every 20 minutes, allowing the volume of water in the bay to build up over time. And that water height increases in the bay as tsunami surges continue to approach and enter that narrow opening of Newport Bay. But even if tsunamis don't flood on shore, they can still do a lot of damage because they can cause strong and unpredictable currents in and around narrow openings like harbor entrances or narrow areas of harbors. Tsunami events can last for a very long time, with many surges, and often the first surge is not the largest. Remember the 1964 tsunami in Crescent City? These factors are what makes tsunamis, even seemingly small tsunamis, dangerous. Next. So, no, you can't surf a tsunami, but nor would you want to. Tsunamis have no face to surf like a regular ocean wave, and they can be filled with dangerous debris. And as we saw during the 2022 Tonga tsunami, we saw firsthand how dangerous it was for surfers to be in the water during the tsunami advisory. The San Francisco Fire Department at Ocean Beach had to rescue vetted, experienced surfers. So don't put yourself or first responders at risk, excuse me, just because you want to try and surf a tsunami. When there's a tsunami warning or advisory, it's far safer to surf the web from your couch. So there's a lot of misconceptions about what tsunamis look like. TVs and movies tend to depict tsunamis as these apocalyptic-sized curling waves, similar to what was shown on the TV Fox show 911 in Santa Monica. But in reality, every tsunami is unique, and some can get quite large, but most are small. Tsunamis may look like a sloping wall of water or a river in flood, and they're often choked with sediment and dangerous debris. However, flooding from tsunamis can also look like this. These are videos from Santa Cruz and Ventura harbors. It doesn't take much to have strong tsunami-induced currents that can be hazardous to harbors, boats, swimmers, and surfers. Let's see if you could advance it one more so we could see what happened in Ventura with a capsized harbor patrol boat. They got capsized because of the strong tsunami-induced currents, even though you don't see huge surges here in the harbor, right? Next. So tsunamis can be generated in any large body of water. They can strike any coastal area all around the world. Certain coastal areas are particularly vulnerable to tsunami, include beaches, bays, lagoons, harbors, and coastal rivers. And California can be impacted by both local and distant source tsunamis. Next. So what's the difference between a local and a distant source tsunami? A distant source tsunami is generated by an earthquake from a faraway source, sometimes on the other side of the ocean. The earthquake will not be felt because the source is far away, right? Furthermore, there will be time to issue and respond to official notifications. Distant tsunamis can arrive in 4 to 13 hours, depending on where they originate. Now, the largest distant source threat to California is from a massive earthquake in the Alaska Aleutian Island regions. And that would take about 4 to 6 hours for a tsunami from Alaska to arrive in California. And this should be enough time for everyone in California to evacuate by foot. We don't recommend evacuating by car, as you could easily get stuck in a traffic jam. Okay. Let's talk about local tsunamis. Local tsunamis can be generated by the sudden movement of offshore faults, like the Cascadia subduction zone, but also by submarine or coastal landslides. Now, the underwater landscape offshore of California reveals areas that have experienced large landslides in the past, capable of producing local tsunamis. One example location is off the coast of Los Angeles, as shown in the figure on the right. A submarine landslide will generally not be large enough to travel great distances, but it can generate a local tsunami that would arrive along the coast in minutes. So, in summary, even though large tsunamis are rare, the entire California coast is at risk. California has a history of damaging tsunamis, which have resulted in loss of life and severe damage to harbor and coastal areas. In the next part of this webinar, Yvette with Cal OES will discuss tsunami awareness, planning, and preparedness information that can save your life or the lives of others. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. We do have a few questions. Before that, just to share that we are recording today's webinar, and it will be shared on the website, and probably by Monday, so just a few days from now. We also will be sharing the PDF of the slides. So basically, where you registered at earthquakecountry.org/2024 California Tsunami Preparedness or 2024 CTP, I'll put that link in the chat, is where you'll be able to find those. Also, we do have a survey, and we'll be asking you to complete that survey. I'll be sharing the link in the chat soon here too. Questions, Nick? Mark Legassi asks, is the term tidal wave synonymous with tsunami? Are these words interchangeable?
Good question, Mark. The term tidal wave was coined way back when, right? Now we know for certain that tsunamis are not caused by tidal action, even though the impacts can be influenced by tidal height, right? If the tsunami arrives at high tide or not, like we saw in Santa Cruz. But the term tidal wave, I don't necessarily like, because it makes it seem like there's something related to tides that are driving the generation of tsunami, and that's not the truth. So we tend to use the term tsunami, which in Japanese means harbor wave, right? Hopefully that answers your question.
Nick, I have a question. Why do you think they called it harbor wave?
That is a good question, Mark. I don't know the exact answer to that. I just know that Japan has a long history of damaging tsunamis, and they have an extensive catalog that dates back hundreds and hundreds of years on tsunami events in Japan. I don't know why they call it a harbor wave. But I'm going to look that up after this.
You can imagine that they were experiencing the distant source tsunamis like you're talking about. So nothing happened, and all of a sudden they got these strange currents in their harbors. They didn't know what the source was.
If the audience wants to look up the orphan tsunami of 1700, that could be a good homework assignment for your fall, to check out what a harbor wave is and what the orphan tsunami wave is in Japan, and how that was linked back to a Cascadia event in 1700 here.
That's very, yeah. Also, is it possible, Mark also asked, to have a tsunami
Okay.
here as powerful as the 2004 Sumatra tsunami?
Good question, Mark. Yes, but not everywhere. Okay, the 2004 Sumatra tsunami was generated by a megathrust earthquake, which is from a subduction zone style event, right? In California, we basically have two different fault systems. In Southern California, everyone knows about the San Andreas fault. That does not produce tsunamis because it's a fault that's sliding laterally when we need to displace an ocean floor upwards to cause tsunamis. Now, there is a subduction zone north of Cape Mendocino in Northern California that has last occurred, ruptured in 1700. And that one, that can produce a very large tsunami, similar to what we saw in Sumatra. And so, there's geologists like myself that have studied this going back thousands of years and tried to get recurrence rates and intervals on how often an event like this occurs so that we could build it into our tsunami maps and hazard planning.
Thank you, Nick. And just to everyone, you can look at the chat. James Caesar from Santa Barbara posted a response about why it's called a harbor wave, where Japanese fishermen might go out to sea and not notice anything, which is true. A tsunami might pass you in the open ocean, you might not tell, but they would then come back to port and discover that their village has been devastated by a huge wave. So thanks, Jim, for sharing that. We'll go ahead and move on to our next presenter. There are some questions here that we'll answer at the end of that presentation. So I'd like to turn over to, again, well, first of all, again, thank you, Nick, for your presentation. And we're going to now introduce Yvette Leduc from the California Office of Emergency Services, and you can begin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we just heard from Nick Grail, who is our partner in the California Tsunami Program with the California Geological Survey. They provide all of the scientific support for our statewide program. So again, my name is Yvette Leduc, and I'm the program manager for the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, Earthquake, Tsunami, and Volcano programs. And we do the emergency management portion of our statewide tsunami program. And we work in partnership with Mark Benthian, the National Weather Service, Redwood Coast Tsunami Work Group, and others to implement our statewide program. Next slide. So this is going to be a short little video here just to give you a little introduction and info on tsunamis. Go ahead, Mark.
Let's put some basic information on the table. While more common in the Pacific, a tsunami can strike any coast, anytime. It's one of the most destructive forces in nature. A series of waves, usually caused by an undersea earthquake. These powerful, fast-rising floodwaters can smash everything in their path. Even small tsunamis can be dangerous, especially to swimmers, surfers, and boats in harbors. But there are ways you can prepare. First, understand the warnings. If an official warning is issued, do what it says. Just as important, pay attention to warnings Mother Nature provides. You may feel a strong or long earthquake. You may see the ocean suddenly rise or fall, or hear a loud roar. If you experience any of these, a tsunami could be coming. Protect yourself. Quickly move to high ground or inland away from the water. Stay out of the tsunami hazard zone until officials tell you it's safe. The first wave may not be the last or the largest. Dangerous currents are possible for several hours or days. Prepare yourself by doing a little homework. Think of places where you spend your time and map out routes to safe places, high ground or inland, away from the water. Practice walking these routes so they become familiar. Be prepared and stay safe.
Okay, next slide. So as Nick mentioned, we've had several tsunamis that have impacted our coast over the last couple hundred years. This slide here shows several slides that we've had impact our coast within the last 15 years. The most notable being the one in the top row, the Japan March 2011 tsunami that Nick mentioned. You can see all the red there, just showing the power and force of the tsunami as it traveled across the Pacific Ocean. The most recent tsunami was generated by the underwater volcanic eruption near Tonga that did travel across the ocean and impacted our coast, as Nick mentioned, back in 2022. Next slide. So this here is a video, and I'll talk you through it a little bit. As Nick mentioned, all tsunamis don't have this big wall of water that you see that are depicted in many television shows, but rather a smaller kind of a bump that can travel. This again is Santa Cruz Harbor. This is the 2011 Tohoku tsunami. And you can see it looks like a little wave, but look at how powerful it is, how it's destroying the docks and the boats. And we definitely don't recommend that you stand along the side of the water as these people are doing in this video. Fortunately, this event happened at low tide, so we didn't see a lot of the flooding that some other tsunami events we've seen. So it stayed within and the people were safe in this event. However, we highly recommend that you evacuate the area and don't stand around and watch because dangerous flooding can happen. And again, you don't need to see a big wall of water for there to be a large damaging impact from these tsunamis. Because again, as Nick mentioned, it's not waves that you normally see when you go to the beach and you can wade through them and walk through them. These waves are actually a surge of water. That's the entire column of the water that goes from the ocean floor to the top, and they are extremely powerful. Next slide. This here is just some more photos of some of the damage. And again, you don't see the big wall of water. And unfortunately, many people see this and don't think that there's a hazard, and they attempt to go into the water and immediately find themselves in peril again because of the power of these waves. Next slide. So many of us ask questions about tsunamis because we don't know a lot about them. So first question is, why do I need to know about tsunamis? I don't live by the coast, I live inland, I'm safe, right? Well, Tilly Smith is a prime example of why it's important to know about tsunamis even if you don't live near the coast. So Tilly Smith was a young girl who went to school in the United Kingdom. And her teacher happened to teach them, her science teacher happened to teach them about tsunamis. If you're not making 150. Many of the parents were wondering why this particular teacher was teaching these kids about tsunamis. Well, like many of us, Tilly's family went on vacation and they happened to be in the Indonesia area during the 2004 tsunami. Tilly happened to be on the beach during that tsunami event with her family and noticed an unusual withdrawal or receding of the ocean water. She immediately notified her parents and others on the beach around them, and is single-handedly, as a young girl, credited for saving over 100 lives that day because she noticed something that she had learned about back home in England and knew what to do and how to act. So even though you don't live near the coast and maybe you don't work near the coast, we all travel. We all have family and friends who may live near the coast or travel near the coast. So it's always extremely important to know that when you do travel or move about, what hazards you could potentially face when you go. Next slide. So as Nick mentioned, there are other hazards besides those powerful waves that we talked about that are associated with tsunamis. And as you can see in the upper right corner, that's a person who decided to try and go out in the water, not realizing how powerful those waves were, and ended up needing to be rescued. So then not only was his life in jeopardy, but it also puts the lives of rescuers in jeopardy as well, which is why we really emphasize that we don't want you in or anywhere near the water during tsunamis. In the lower left, as Nick showed in his video, this is a photo from Santa Cruz Harbor. So again, it looks fairly still, fairly innocent, but yet those waves are so powerful and so strong that it floods on shore and impacts vehicles. And you can also see in the lower right, from the Chile earthquake. It was in 1960, a magnitude 9.5. This is a photo from Hilo, Hawaii. So not only can it impact people and small items, but it moves, again, entire vehicles, boats, and large infrastructure. So we don't want anyone near the coast, not only due to the damage from the water, but these large objects that can be moving and can injure you as well. There's also hazardous materials and chemicals that could be in the water that could cause illness and death possibly as well. And also utility outages, power, water, sewer, and there could also be down power lines. Next slide. So next question, we've heard a lot about what tsunamis are, what they look like when they're coming. So how do we know if they're coming? Next slide. So there's two different types of tsunamis, and Nick mentioned these as well. One is a local threat or a local source tsunami. So these often can happen, as we mentioned, on the north coast of California. We have the Cascadia subduction zone, which could produce strong earthquakes off the coast, which could then generate a tsunami that would then move on land. There are also other fault lines along California's coast, down off central and southern California, which could also produce tsunamis. So there are three different types of triggers or things you could potentially notice that may indicate a tsunami is coming. You may feel strong, unusually prolonged earth shaking. You may see water receding, exposing the ocean floor, or you may hear a loud ocean roar. Now, it's important to note that you may not experience all three of these. You may experience all three if there's an earthquake underwater offshore, but as Nick also mentioned, and you can see again on the right-hand side of this slide, a landslide could produce a tsunami, which you wouldn't necessarily feel any strong shaking. So again, it's important to know all three of those potential ways that you could notice that a tsunami may be coming. And so if one or more of these occur, we want you to immediately prepare to evacuate inland and to high ground, because again, it could only be a matter of a few minutes before the tsunami begins to arrive. Next slide. So this here is our tsunami triumvirate, and this shows what we want you to do if there's a tsunami. So again, if you're on the coast and you're experiencing very strong shaking, we want you to use caution. You may not immediately be able to begin to run and evacuate inland into high ground. If there's very strong shaking and you're unsteady on your feet, we want you to drop down and cover immediately where you're at, because if you fall and injure yourself, you may not be able to evacuate. And then you become a casualty where rescuers need to come in and provide assistance. So we want you to be able to protect yourself first, and then immediately get up and move as quickly as you possibly can inland and to high ground. And we want you to do that on foot. It's the safest way for you to evacuate, preventing injury and preventing any obstructions that may prevent others from evacuating. And then we want you to remain there until it's safe to return. A couple slides ago, I mentioned that not only may you see debris and large objects floating around in the water, but there could also be, again, hazardous materials or down power lines. So we need to have an opportunity for local officials to go in to survey the area, check to make sure there's no other secondary hazards, and then give the all clear for folks to be able to return to the area. And again, the initial tsunami waves may not be the strongest waves. It may be several hours before we see the strongest, most impactful waves arriving. So as we experienced in Tonga, many folks thought that those initial strong waves were it and it was over, so they started to go back and then realized that the stronger waves were coming later on, and we had to get folks out of the water. Next slide. So the second way we know, and Nick mentioned, we have distant source tsunamis, or tsunamis that come from other locations besides off of California's immediate coastal area, from around the Pacific Rim. And you can see in the photo on the left side, just kind of those little red, kind of triangularly shaped objects around the Pacific Rim. So that's our tsunami warning system. And those are where our DART system is what they call it. The National Weather Service owns and operates these DART buoys, which you can see in the picture on the upper right side. So these DART buoys are equipped with sensors that you can see on the lower right side that extend to the ocean floor. These sensors can detect when there's a change in water pressure, which sends that information up to the buoy, which then can transmit it to the tsunami warning centers, who then put out alerting information that a tsunami is on its way, and they will determine what the potential impacts could be to California. So as the tsunami travels across the ocean, those buoys are able to detect the tsunami as it travels and provide updated information to the warning centers, who then are able to provide us with the information we need to respond. Next slide. So on the left side is a photo of the tsunami.gov website. So that's the website that's owned and operated by the National Weather Service. And you can go on this website and they have a lot of information from historical tsunamis, a lot of information on tsunami alerts, and the tsunami hazard itself. On the right side is an example of an information statement that's issued by the National Weather Service. These statements will be issued for any tsunami of a magnitude 4 or greater that occurs near the coast. Now, some of these may be issued for earthquakes that occur far inland that are nowhere near the coast, and people may think, well, why are they issuing a tsunami bulletin for these earthquakes? And the reason for that is because if you are on the beach or the immediate coastal area and you feel shaking, the Weather Service wants to provide you with the information you need to know if it indeed was an earthquake that could potentially produce a tsunami or not. So again, you may not receive this information and most likely will not in time to evacuate if it is a local source tsunami, because we need you to start evacuating right away. However, this will eventually come. You will receive this information, and so you'll know if you need to continue evacuating or if it was an earthquake that occurred further inland and it will not produce a tsunami. Next slide. So how can you get information if a tsunami is coming? So there's several different ways that you can get that communication. So the National Tsunami Warning Center does issue alerts. Those alerts do go out on Twitter. So if you have your alerts activated in your Twitter and you follow the National Tsunami Warning Center, you can see the alerts that they send out. They will show up on Twitter. Also, NOAA weather radios. So we encourage everyone to have NOAA weather radios, especially if you live near the coast and want to get information on coastal alerts. They will be broadcast over NOAA weather radio. They will also be alerted on the television, so the emergency alert system will be activated and that information will go across your radio and your television screen. Also, you can go to the website in the lower left corner, the calalerts.org website, and sign up to receive alerts from your local counties. And we highly encourage you to do this. So you can get information at the federal level, you can get information at the state level, but it's extremely important that you sign up to receive alerts from your county and your cities if they issue them. That way you'll have that local alert messaging that's really critical so that if you do need to evacuate, you'll know where you need to go. You'll receive regular updates on the status of the tsunami and the current situation and if any damage is occurring in your local area. And then you'll also receive information as to when it's safe for you to return. Next slide. So here is the different tsunami alert levels that you may see if you do have access to them on your Twitter, if you hear about them on the NOAA weather radio. So the top two that really have the potential to provide impacts to us are the advisory and warning levels. So basically a watch is just something's happened that we think may turn into a tsunami that could have impacts. So that's kind of a monitoring phase and a preparedness phase for us. The advisory is really, hey, we're going to start to see impacts in the water, especially in our harbor and marina areas. So if any of you live on boats, you would definitely want to get off your boats and move on to land where it's safe. And also there may be some strong currents and some local coastal flooding. So we would want people to get out of the beach and immediate coastal areas. For a tsunami warning, you will receive a wireless emergency alert on your phone. So you would not need to be signed up for any local alert messaging to receive that warning notification. However, again, it is extremely important to be signed up for your local alert messaging just so you can get additional information. But the warnings will have impacts on land, and so we will recommend for our local officials to immediately implement evacuations. Most of our local counties have tsunami evacuation plans, and they will follow those to get people out of harm's way during the tsunami. Again, do not return back to the area until you receive word from your local officials to do so. So now we know how we can find out if a tsunami is coming. So what should we do? What can we do as residents of California or visitors to California to make sure we're prepared? So there's 3 really key things: be informed, be prepared, and get involved. So congratulations to all of you on this webinar, because you're already doing that first step of getting informed. You can also attend local events where they're having tsunami education and get more information there. And then also there's a lot of information available on tsunamizone.org. We have brochures, we have one-pagers that you can get access to and learn more about tsunamis. Next slide. So one of the key things to do is find out, you may not be sure if you're in a tsunami zone. So you want to find out. So there's a couple different ways that you can do that. So in the upper right corner, as Nick mentioned, we have tsunami.ca.gov, where all of our tsunami hazard area maps are located. So you can go on to that website, you can click on your county, and you can see right where that hazard area line is, or what areas are going to potentially be impacted by tsunami by looking at those maps. And they're interactive. You can zoom in and out and see kind of where exactly they go in your location. Another good way to get information is to go on the left side to the FEMA NRI map, or this is the National Risk Index map. This map, you can zoom into your local county. You can see up there they have some drop-down menus, and you can look at your local county, and you can also type in an address and find out what potential risks you face at that address. So you can put in your work, your school, your home, families' homes, and find out exactly what impacts you may face there. So the second step is be prepared. There's a lot of things you can do to prepare yourself for a tsunami or any other hazard for that matter. One of the key things is to have an evacuation kit, or also a stay-at-home kit. An evacuation kit should be in a bag and contain all the items you should need if you need to leave your home. Remember, tsunamis can last for at least 1 to 2 days, so you may need to be prepared to be out of your house for at least a couple days, even for a tsunami. Also, you may need to be prepared to stay at home. So make sure you have items at home that you can access if you don't have electricity or water for an extended period of time. Also, make a family plan. Mark, if you could go back just for a second. Also, establishing a family plan, knowing what you're going to do if you're separated and not able to get together before evacuating for a tsunami, if needed. The next thing you can do after you get information, you get prepared, get involved, practice, do a drill. We've got Tsunami Preparedness Week coming up. That's a perfect time to get together with your neighbors, your coworkers, your family, your friends, or just yourself, and practice walking out of the area. There's information on tsunamizone.org that can show you how to navigate and put together a tsunami walk. There's also videos, and it's pretty easy to do. It may be too late for you to do this year, but you don't necessarily have to do it during Tsunami Preparedness Week. You can also do it during World Tsunami Awareness Day, which is November 5th, or you can do it anytime throughout the year. Mark, if you could go back to the previous slide, please.
We are running a little late, so we're just trying to move
Okay. Okay, I just want to mention real quick on the last slide, right here, you'll see in many communities, go up to the signs, there you go. All of our coastal communities now have tsunami signs like you see in the photo on the right. So when you do practice your tsunami walk, I recommend you follow those signs so you're familiar with the routes in your area. And also on the left, many of our counties now have these tsunami evacuation routes, which are in maps, in kiosks in really high populated coastal areas that show you a map of how you can get out of the area. Okay, next slide. So again, we encourage you to participate in Tsunami Preparedness Week. This year, we already have over 200,000 people signed up. So we're really excited. We hope all of you get involved, practice your evacuation drills, practice what you need to do, make sure you have a communication plan with your family, and you're ready for the next tsunami. So here are 3 sites again that you can go to get additional information. And then on the next slide is our contact information. And we thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Yvette. And while you've been presenting, Nick, our presenter earlier, has been answering questions in writing in the Q&A. So if you go to the Q&A section, click on Answered, you'll be able to see those answers. We will be putting those into the resources we provide after the webinar, also on the link to the webinar page that's been put into the chat a few times already, earthquakecountry.org/2024 CTP. We'll go ahead and move on to our last presenter, who's going to, from the City and County of San Francisco, Susan Clark, talking about their tsunami signage project. And Susan, thank you for joining us, and go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan Clark, and I am with the Department of Emergency Management. I work as an emergency planner with the Division of Emergency Services, and I'm really glad to be here, so thank you. Before I begin this short presentation, I do want to just say that without Rick Wilson and Nick Grail with the California Geological Survey, as well as Yvette LeDuc with Cal OES, we really wouldn't be able to accomplish as much as we have so far. So their expertise, their guidance, their patience over these many months, they've really been invaluable to our success. So thank you again to Rick and Nick and Yvette and to your teams. Next slide, please. So when we received the state of California's update to the tsunami inundation maps for evacuation planning, we began to understand the extent to which our own inundation zones extended further inland. And as seen on this particular slide, the tsunami level 4, which is the maximum scenario for evacuation, has increased in size along the peninsula, except for most of the higher elevations on the northwest side and the southwest side. So based on these findings, we began the process of determining San Francisco's status in terms of accurate and effective signage for residents and visiting tourists. Next slide, please. So during about 2 weeks of field work, we identified all existing tsunami signage, any signs that were damaged or absent, and signs that were now located within the inundation zones. We also identified, based on Cal OES's guidance, where new signage needed to be installed. So it was based on these findings, we determined additional tsunami signage was definitely needed to increase public safety. Next slide, please. So this is our current tsunami signage. You can see where the emphasis was and where it needs to increase. We also understand that urban areas such as San Francisco have a tremendous number of traffic signs. And so our concern was that adding even more traditional signage would further clutter the visual field for drivers and pedestrians. And with the help of the Cal OES tsunami team, we were put in contact with the Oregon Office of Emergency Management. In 2016, Oregon had already adopted New Zealand's Blue Line project, which uses street surface decals and paint to better notify its residents and travelers of an impending tsunami. So we're really excited by the prospect of, at some point in the future, being able to implement San Francisco's own Blue Wave Safety Project. Next slide, please. Based on our success elsewhere, we're exploring incorporating these blue signs in San Francisco as part of an overall tsunami signage initiative. We don't have confirmed funding yet and installation approval yet, but we've been working closely with Cal OES and other partners to build out the proposal. And due to a good number of international languages spoken within San Francisco, our design would emphasize a more universal understanding of the decal messaging. And we would also be proposing using the colors of light blue with white, just to ensure that drivers and pedestrians view these as something other than exclusive traffic signs. And also this type of signage where we would utilize both a line and a circle decal that's made of preformed thermoplastic, whose properties have like high reflectivity and darkness, and they're also anti-skid. Next slide, please. And based on our field work, we're proposing these blue line locations, which are marked by X's. You'll notice that this mapping has the markings are other than blue because, you know, blue on blue mapping doesn't show up well. So bear with us on that one. But on the lines that we're looking at, these are locations where they are main corridors for vehicular traffic, and the blue line decals would provide clear messaging to motorists. Next slide, please. Additionally, based on our field work, we're proposing these blue circle locations, which are marked by orange dots. And these particular locations often have large numbers of tourists. And these blue circle decals would provide clear messaging to pedestrians, not only that they're on an evacuation route, but the direction that they need to evacuate in. Next slide, please. So this map right here kind of gives you an idea of the placement of all the new signage, which utilizes kind of a hybrid approach. We're talking about the traditional metal signs on metal posts that many are familiar with, and also incorporating the preformed thermoplastic decals. And so while there is a clear advantage to using the new technology to inform and assist the public about how to safely evacuate, we also understand that in some locations, traditional metal signage really still does have an important role to play in this effort. Next slide, please. So just to take a closer look, we're looking at we're looking at Giants Ballpark, also known as Oracle Park. The black arrows point to the traditional metal signage that directs both vehicle and foot traffic where entering and leaving a tsunami hazard zone is. The orange arrow is pointing to the blue circle decal that's fixed on the street surface, which guides pedestrians to the evacuation route and the direction that they have to evacuate towards. And then the red arrow, excuse me, is pointing to the blue line. That's a, excuse me.
Just while Susan's taking a moment, we have put more answers into the Q&A in the chat. And there's a question about getting a certificate of attendance. We will, if you email us at info@earthquakecountry.org, if you need a certificate, we can send one to you. Thank you. But do keep putting your questions in the Q&A. Susan, if you'd like to continue.
Yes, thank you. Let's see, excuse me, everyone. Most inopportune time. And what we were talking about was the red arrow. Oh, I'm sorry. Slide previous, please. The red arrow is pointing to the blue line decal that's affixed on the street surface, and that essentially alerts vehicular traffic that they've entered into a tsunami safe zone. And very quickly, as I mentioned, we're coordinating with Cal OES. This is a draft of what our phases would look like if we were able to move forward. And excuse me. And at this point, we're waiting for confirmation on funding for signage, as well as looking at coordinating with our city partners around funding for for installation. Next slide. Thank you for your time and attention. I apologize that near the end I choked up a little bit. And I just appreciate this opportunity, Mark. Thank you for us to be able to share our tsunami safety efforts and aspirations with you. Thank you.
And thank you. It's a great model for elsewhere, and a lot of people are commenting on that in the chat. I have put the link to the survey. Please, before you would leave, to click on that and complete it. It won't take you very long at all. Additional questions have been answered in the Q&A in writing, so please look for there. Just a reminder that 2024 California Tsunami Preparedness Week starts this Saturday. It's a little bit more than a week. It's basically so that you have both weekends surrounding the week to have your activities. And there's still plenty of time to plan things, because some of the activities that we suggest that you can do as part of the week, that you can register that you've done these activities, just like you do a shakeout, registering at tsunamizone.org can be your participation today on this webinar. You can update your preparedness kit and your go bags as that your evacuation plan. You can review, of course, if you're near a zone. And really the important message is that maybe you yourself or family don't live, within the tsunami hazard zone, which is in most areas only a couple hundred feet, if that, from the shore. Many areas much less than that. But you may live further inland, but you may visit the beach or somewhere along the shore one day, and it's important that you know what to do, or others know what to do. And you may have family or friends or colleagues who live at the beach, so making sure that you share this information with them is really important too. So lots of things that you can do and be included as part of your registration. Go to tsunamizone.org/register. This is how we know how many people we're engaging, and we're hoping to increase. Last year, I think we had over 420,000 people. So we still have a way to go, but as we did last year at this time. So please go and provide that information. And if you have an event that's open to the public or news media, you can also go to tsunamizone.org/calendar and let us know so that other people might attend. And then you can think about, we're a little over time, what's something you've learned or will do or will use or will tell others. And please do share that. You can share that, pop it in the chat if you like. A couple of other questions. There was questions, again, I had already answered about if you would like to get a certificate, please email info@earthquakecountry.org, and we will, if you need a certificate, we will get that to you. Thank you for those answering that. There's a question in the chat about what about sirens, and are there any plans to have sirens added? I don't know, Yvette, if you want to say something about that quickly.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so for the sirens, those are actually purchased and installed and maintained by local jurisdictions. So it's up to each individual city or county to decide if they want to replace those sirens or have them maintained. So that's something that they need to decide if they want to do, or if they're going to implement some other type of alert and warning system within the counties and cities.
Thank you, Yvette. All right, well, we are out of time, and thank you all for joining us. Again, we will be putting the recording of the webinar on the website that's been listed in the chat, and also the PDF of the slides, and the questions that have been asked will also be added there too. And also some of the additional information that some of you have put into the chat. We appreciate your participation today and what you're going to do as part of Tsunami Preparedness Week. Please do go and register what you're doing. And it's not even just during that week, but anytime during the year related to tsunamis, just like you can register shakeout activities for earthquakes any time of the year. With that, I send appreciation to our presenters again today. Everybody have a good rest of your day.